Hey, it's time for happy hour.
Woo!
Y'all have that down. I'm really proud of you guys.
This is our 10th. This is a special show.
This is 10? We've done this 10 times?
This is when we do like a clip show, right? Like they do in the sitcoms when they hit milestones, right? We do just a clip show.
It seems like 11.
Oh, yeah, you're right. It's good to be doing this with you guys still. Hey, but I'm excited to see some of your faces, at least up close. We might be distant, but there is a baseball season coming our way. The schedule was released. We knew there was a season coming, but my goodness, now we have a schedule. It's getting even more real. So 60 game sprint, if you will. Is that what we're calling it, a sprint?
I say we drink every time somebody says sprint this year.
Okay.
All right, Blummer just started. Blummer just started. That's perfect.
I just said it 3 times, so
Yeah.
go for it. Throw them back. But seriously, I mean, it was good. It felt like forever for that schedule to come out. But, now that we've seen it, TK, do you have your pocket schedule ready? Or it's a tiny little schedule?
One page.
I gotta guess.
Just a little one.
They're going to be little this year. We have to fold them up like this. Yeah, I mean, it's great. It's great. I mean, different start times, right? Until we get to that last month, we were playing the Rangers a little more than it's a lot of 8-10 starts, 6-10, 8-10, and then day games. So that's a little different, but that was the trade-off for getting earlier starts out west. But yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting. We finally have teams that we know who are playing, the Mariners to start and then the Dodgers. So we're kicking it off the right way.
I'm excited about.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I'm excited about that second series. We all knew it was going to be the American League West with a lot of the rumors that we were hearing, and then it was just a matter of time before it kind of fell into that National League West for some of that interleague action. But that Dodgers series is going to be a little contentious, and I'm kind of looking forward to it, to be honest with you.
And you start looking at the pitching matchups right away, and I would imagine they try to get it where Walker Buehler and Clayton Kershaw face off against those 2 games with
Exactly.
the Astros. Don't you think?
Oh man,
no
I'm
question.
with you on that. Set that thing up.
Without a doubt. So I want to ask, kind of what you just touched on there, Blummer. I want to ask Blummer and Sparky, the 2 former players. You talk about how contentious that Dodgers series could be. How contentious do you think it could potentially be? Now, it's different now because, they're really trying to curb any sort of benches clearing incidents more so that to prevent the spread of COVID than anything else. But I mean, and obviously you never know until the games get here, right? And a lot could change between now and then. But what could you envision happening?
Go ahead, Sparky.
Well, I think the Astros legitimately have a chip on their shoulder now. And I think, it was kind of tail between the legs. There was shame and there was sorrow and all of that. But when everybody started kind of blowing up on them, and there's particular members of this Dodgers team that kind of went off. And I think I'm with Blummer on this, is I don't feel like the Astros are the only team involved in this. So to see a lot of players around the league kind of jump on them and say things out in the open as egregiously as they had, I think it gave the Astros just that extra incentive to carry this with a chip on their shoulder. And I think they're going to go out there mad, and they want to prove to everybody that they didn't have to do what they were found to do. But at the same time, man, this Astros team is super, super talented. And this offense, I think, is the best in baseball. So I'm looking forward to this, and I'm looking forward to them scoring a lot of runs against the Dodgers.
I completely agree. Even if you do get the matchups like you're talking about with Walker Buehler and Kershaw out there, I think these guys have a little bit extra within themselves that they're going to reach down and get. And a lot of it has to do with spring training before it got canceled because of COVID. You can kind of see them walking around. The heads were hanging a little bit. Like Sparky said, the other teams are bashing on them. And they were just kind of just going through the motions. I think with this break, it's actually given them an opportunity to let some of that go by the wayside and kind of re-energize and look towards the season. And then the schedule comes out and you realize that you are going to get to face some of your critics up close and personal. And we know that some of these guys already have that chip on their shoulder. This is just going to make that chip hopefully a little bit better, a little bit bigger. And I think when I say contentious, I think it's when the Astros do something good, You may not be able to do the dugout celebration with your boys, but those bat flips might be a little more excessive than normal.
I like it. No, it's so true. It's a good chance early to really prove how good this team can be and what they can do and all of that as well. And I know they have to get off to a really good start. How many times are we going to say that this season with you guys as broadcasters drink? So, but just the AL West alone, they've got 40 games against their division rivals, and then the 20 games against the NL West. Who do y'all see in this division, giving the Astros a difficult time when it comes to defending their title, and how they're built and how ready they are as they're getting ready for their 60-game seasons?
Well, you got to look at Oakland, right? I mean, the last couple of years with what they've been able to do to get into the wild card game and, winning over 95 games each of the last 2 years, they have a lot of guys back. They have a lot of good young talent as well that started to emerge in the latter part of last season. I think that's the Astros' stiffest challenge in the division, just has been the case the last couple of years. And because the season's so much shorter, the Astros aren't going to be able, no team is going to be able to pull away from anybody and win the division by, say, 10 or 15 games. It's not going to happen this year. So I think that can make things pretty interesting.
I think it's going to be really hard to handicap any team, including the Astros, because you don't know what type of team you're going to be able to field on a weekly basis. When the Astros start their season, okay, is Jordan going to be available? Is Jose Urquidy going to be available? Is Josh James going to be available? That's your questions already, and that's 40% of your starting rotation in last year's Rookie of the Year. So they're iffy right off the get-go. And in the other teams, there's going to be a lot of other teams with similar situations, I think.
Yeah, I think the A's are definitely a team to beat. I think the younger you are and the more flexibility you have with your staff, the better off you are. And they were able to use Puck and Luzardo last year out of the bullpen, and they can now mix and match these guys within the rotation and have little piggyback situations. I just think, the fact that they started late is not going to help them, but they'll have plenty of time to catch up. The Angels, to me, are going to be good, but I'm still not 100% sure if Mike Trout's made up his mind what he's going to do, and that obviously impacts things tremendously.
Yeah, his bat in the lineup is obviously going to help the Angels. I mean, they have a decent pitching staff, but I just don't think they have enough pitching to hold down an opponent's run scoring ability, especially the Astros. But I think the A's are the same one. I'm kind of curious. I actually talked to a couple of the A's guys. I'm going, you guys, they're so good in September. They have had a history of being phenomenal in September and getting off to slow start. So I wonder how this season's going to affect them. Are they just going to go straight into that September mode and start just tearing the cover off the baseball and not worry about April? Because we're literally sitting at a tie, everybody's tied with 100 games into the season. And now we have that sprint towards the end of the season. And that's where they've been exceptional over the last couple of seasons. And it's just another year for a really good, young, talented group to be playing together. And I'm with you on Puck and Luzardo. Those guys are going to have a huge impact on what the A's do in trying to compete with the Astros in the AL West.
So more on the schedule and just kind of breaking it down. I'm sure you guys looked at it. It's not hard to break down, only 60 games. Our brains are so used to seeing a big schedule and how it's all going to work and how a team's going to work through some of the tough stretches. But in this case, talking about Oakland, I saw it was like 7 of the 10 games they're going to play against the A's will be in Oakland. I think it was 6 of 10 against the Angels will be in Anaheim. They only have to go to Seattle once. So it's a long plane ride. We, of course, know that as well. And then they don't see the Rangers until September. But the travel is a big topic when it comes to the Astros and the Rangers. And for those of us who've been traveling, like I haven't known anything else other than a lot of travel and a lot of long flights. But in this case, this could be a challenge, I think, maybe an advantage for some, if you will. And what are your thoughts on that part of the schedule?
I think the Central's got it the best. Everybody's so compacted in the Central. It depends. Like when I was looking at the AL East and NL East teams, like if you piggyback New York, Philadelphia, Philly, Washington, all those teams that are right up there in the same corridor, Baltimore, you could do train rides or bus rides, and that would help. But a lot of teams didn't end up getting the schedule the way they wanted. So I guess you have to break down each team's schedule. But yeah, the Astros have to travel a little bit. The fact that they're the last team to play the Rangers struck me as kind of odd. I would love it if by then somehow we're allowed to travel and check out that new ballpark. But anyway, yeah, I don't think it's a huge burden just because that's what the Astros have been used to. It's just that everybody else will have easier travel.
And because this season is a sprint, my favorite phone service is Sprint. I feel like since there's only 6 games in this sprint of a schedule, that they want to play all their players as much as possible because every game means so much more during a sprint of a season. That makes things a little bit tougher. Just 6 games off in those 60 days.
How are y'all
Anybody got
feeling?
any coffee?
Y'all feeling okay?
Some black coffee? Anybody?
I don't know. I might have to run to the fridge if Sparky keeps talking.
Somebody mute
Good thing I
Sparky.
got this case behind me.
Thank goodness Anheuser-Busch is our sponsor. If Sprint was our sponsor, we'd be dead.
You say?
Hey, you know what Dusty said though today about all this travel is, you know, we're talking about them going to California a lot because they've got the NL West, AL West. So most of their games, or not most of their games, but I think it's just under half their games are in California, Washington, and then even Arizona. And we have to make sure that these states are good to go. And Dusty was saying that he's like, we gotta hope that California is in a good place. We need them to do their part. If it gets worse, what does that mean for the game, and not just for the Astros, for the game of baseball? And that really got me thinking. When we hear that term, we are all in this together. I mean, that is just one example of what needs to happen in order to be a successful and safe baseball season, right?
Yeah, without a doubt.
Is when they were originally, they went through so many permutations and machinations. When they were originally talking about it, they were thinking Arizona, Florida, and maybe Texas would be the 3 hubs, and people would just stay in those 3 hubs. And now those 3 states have about the highest rate of anybody in the country. So you never know. I mean, the NBA is sitting in Florida right now. It's going to be it's going to change day to day, and hopefully it changes for the better as we get closer to opening day.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point, and whether it's in the West or anywhere else where, and this is something Major League Baseball had talked about, is where there are going to be series that are probably going to have to get moved because, you know, if you have a spike somewhere, the local government doesn't feel comfortable having, you know, teams traveling there, that could be an issue. And so I think that's something that we're probably going to see. I would be surprised if every single game of this 60-game schedule, if it's played, which is also a bit of a, you know, that's a big if too. But if every game of these 60-game schedules are played for every team, I'd be surprised if every single one of them were played in the stadiums that they were intended to be played in. I mean, that's just the reality of where we're at right now as a country with COVID, and you know, we're definitely not out of the woods yet by any means.
Think back to 1981 when they had the strike in the middle of the season. You know, when it's all said and done, there was teams that played 103 games during the course of that season, and there were a few teams that played as many as 111 games. So if there are cancellations at some point and they don't want to make them up, I don't think it's unprecedented to think that they'll just throw them away.
I think last week we were talking about how this opening day seemed far just because of all the hurdles that baseball had to cross to get there. And we are seeing it already through just a week of summer camp. We're seeing it with the Astros summer camp with, you know, players not being able to work out if they haven't received their test results yet. Players are hoping that speeds up a little bit. Dusty's saying that today. You know, just it still feels like there's some things that need smoothing out in the next 10 days or so. And I think that I have a lot of faith in this. I'm hoping that, you know, I'm hoping to just stay optimistic through all of this. And I'm listening to these players, but they're voicing their concerns as they should be. Have y'all seen these stories, heard these stories, and are you as optimistic as I am that it will be a very important, but, you know, they'll figure some things out in the next 10 days or so?
Well, I think they're going to have to, because I think if there continue to be delays in terms of getting results, which leads to guys not being able to have workouts and things like that, I think there are going to be some players who are going to wonder, well, you know, is this really worth it? Is this really worth being away from my family when we're not even certain if we're going to have all the testing protocols as efficient as we were led to believe. So I think that's a big question. And if this winds up seeping into games, that's a huge problem. We were talking about Clayton Kershaw earlier. What if Kershaw gets tested, say the day before his start, and he's supposed to start that day, the next day, and the test results haven't come in? So does he get scratched from that start? So now you're starting to talk about, and obviously there are bigger things in competition when you're talking about COVID, but if you're talking about the integrity of the season and the schedule, if you get to a point where players aren't able to play, not because they might have tested positive or been around someone who was positive, but because they haven't gotten their results back yet, that's a huge problem. And I think it's something that Major League Baseball has to address if they want to be able to play this season.
Players are going out there and taking the most risk of anybody involved in any of these sports, whether it's NBA, NHL, MLS. Players are putting themselves at risk by putting themselves in a clubhouse, creating contact on the field, whatever it is. And if every organization has promised to test them every other day and get the test back so that they know they're playing in a safe environment, it's paramount they do that. They can't say that July 4th snuck up on them and they didn't have a chance to get the testing done. That's a ridiculous statement for me. I think they saw it coming. They knew it was there. They need to find a way to work around it, because they are not forcing, but they're imploring that these guys go out there on the field and risk their health for the greater good of the game. They need to step up on their end and get that testing done and get those results back so that these guys know the environment they're playing in.
So there's a couple of reasons why players take these risks too, though, right? Number one, it's because they love the game, they love to compete, but probably even more prevalent is because they want to make money. There's a small window for a lot of these players. I'd say the majority of these players to make enough money to really impact their lives. Now, there's about 10, 15% of the players that are making enough money in 1 year to last them a lifetime. And those are the guys that have the options to opt out. And we've seen that on occasion. Usually, we're not looking at the players that have only played 2 or 3 years in the game that have the options to opt out. So I think that it's going to be really crucial for everybody involved. And I know there's been a lot of people that have taken on probably 5 or 6 extra jobs. And I'm thinking, of course, of people who are like the trainers and the strength trainers and people like that in baseball right now that are doing everything they can on their end to make things as safe and smooth as possible. You think about the clubhouse kids, everybody out there disinfecting baseballs, just even the smallest jobs. So it seems like, everybody else involved should be on top of their game and not be surprised by a 4th of July and some people off and having tests come back late.
Well, you remember when we first found out baseball was coming back, we all said there's going to be more questions than answers for now. Now we still have questions, and they're different questions. So you guys know how much I love the PGA Tour. Just last week, Cameron Champ, a guy who plays occasionally up in Blue Jack, lives here in the Houston area. He's sitting at home Wednesday afternoon. PGA Tour calls him up and says, hey, you got a bunch of negative tests in a row. You can play this week. You just have to get to Detroit tomorrow and play in the tournament. So he flew out in the morning, got an afternoon tee time, and actually played very well. But now he's coming to say, and he's still being very careful about it, he's coming to say he doesn't think he ever had it. He just had one positive test. The rest have been negatives. He said a specialist told him he never had it. Joey Gallo has not practiced yet for the Texas Rangers. He's 2 for 4, and it's not an inter-squad game. He's gone positive, negative in his 4 tests. So there's a lot of discrepancies here with false positives, even false negatives, which are scarier. And so now today on the PGA Tour, I don't know if you guys saw this, I just learned that 3 guys who have been stopped from playing in previous events, Denny McCarthy, Dylan Fratelli, and Nick
This is
Watney.
interesting.
You know this, Plummer?
Yeah.
So they are still able to play tomorrow over in Ohio. They're playing 2 events at the same course back to back, which never happens, but that's part of the craziness of the pandemic. They're able to play tomorrow, even though they've all recently tested positive for COVID-19. They have been told by the CDC and the PGA Tour that there are viral RNA that can cause a positive test. And if you're still asymptomatic after all these tests, you're not contagious anymore. So these 3 guys are going to play in the tournament. They're not allowed inside the clubhouse. They're basically doing what we do when we show up and change our shoes in the car and show up on the first tee. But those 3 guys are the COVID-19 group tomorrow because they're not allowed to socialize or be around anybody else. It's crazy.
Amazing.
We don't know all the answers right now. These questions are going to keep churning between now and when opening day comes.
Yeah, no, and to all of your points, I mean, if keeping an Alex Bregman just from practice one day, I mean, we're still in summer camp when it comes to the day before a start, a day before a big game. My goodness, yeah, you hope some of this is ironed out here pretty quickly. And there are some questions about who is where some of these guys are, and there are a lot of questions that we have that haven't been answered by the Astros either. There's a lot of unknown concern. There's 4 guys that have not reported to camp yet. They're hoping that Josh James is going to be there sooner than the other guys, but like Sparky, I think you said it. This is a couple of guys, and Josh James and Jose Urquidy, that you now have questions if they're even going to be ready in that starting rotation for you come opening day. How do you guys feel about the starting rotation and the opening day roster come opening day, given all that's going on, but also just, do you feel like these guys, what you've heard and what you've seen, do you feel like these guys are going to be ready when the Mariners show up here on July 24th?
I think that's a good question.
I have concerns about the rotation. There's no doubt about that. You lose Garrett Cole and you lose Wade Miley before this even begins. You have to have questions and wonder where you're going to get quality innings to take their place. Don't forget, man, Wade Miley was phenomenal for 5 months of the season, really. So to make up for that, and you're thinking Jose Urquidy, okay, yeah, I have confidence in Jose Urquidy, but he's not here yet. I have confidence in Josh James. He's a dynamic pitcher, but I don't know if they want him to be a starter or reliever. In a shortened sprint type season, I think that he might be more of a weapon 2 or 3 times a week out of the bullpen, especially if Joe Smith isn't available. So who do you slide into the 7th inning? And I think Josh James is certainly a candidate for that. So no, I'm not really comfortable with the Astros rotation and their pitching staff as a whole right now. And I certainly think they have a lot of capable arms in reserve. But I'm really excited about their offense. I think their offense is the best, but they lack a little bit in the arms department.
Let me ask you something about, so they do have that lack if those guys don't show up and they're not ready. But I think it's very interesting that they brought in James Click, and I wonder how much influence he's going to have in working with Brent Strom in maybe piggybacking guys, or maybe doing the openers, or trying to create a little, committee day where they throw everybody out there on a 5th day to try and create some length in that rotation and give those guys the days off until they get somebody ready. And is Brad Peacock still on our team? That dude can pitch anytime you ask him, man. Just give him the baseball. I think it'd be fun to throw him back out there for a couple starts too.
Yeah, whether he's starting or sprinting in from the bullpen.
Amen to that, brother.
But yeah, I share your guys' concern. I mean, obviously, the top 3. Those guys are going to be there. You're going to have Verlander, you're going to have Greinke, you're going to have Lance. 2 of them are pitching tomorrow in an inter-squad game, so that'll be kind of cool to see the results of that. But then beyond that, like Blummer said, like Sparky said, there's some questions, and they might end up mixing and matching those last 2 spots in the rotation and making it, similar to what the Rays have done and other teams have done with that opener. But I don't think anything's off the table right now for this kind of season.
Yeah.
Robert, why did the Rays use an opener to begin with? You remember?
They felt like they had guys they felt like they had some relievers who were better in short stints early in games, but it was more about they felt like they had young starters that weren't fully stretched out, didn't have a whole lot of big league experience, because the year they start using opener, if I remember correctly, I think 3 of their starters got hurt in spring training or right before spring training. So they were in a position where they felt like, all right, we're relying on all this inexperience in the rotation, so let's give them a little bit of a buffer and get through the top of the order with some guys who we know can do it for an inning or 2 in a short sprint. But you talk about the Rays with the opener when it started. Don't forget, it may not have happened if they hadn't had several injuries to their rotation at the beginning of that year.
Yeah, and the other thing, in talking to some of the guys who are in the forefront of that decision, is Sergio Romo was the first one to do it, and then Ryan Stanley kind of became the one that they used the most as the opener. And the theory for those guys, at least partially for why they did it, is they're like, why do we sit around all game and look for the perfect matchup for Sergio Romo and hope it lands at the start of an inning or wherever he can come in, whether it's why not just schedule him, who's side arming nasty stuff from the right side, schedule him to face 2 out of 3 righties right off the top of the gate, because we know what their lineup is. So that was part of the thinking, is they could line up guys knowing where they were going to fit into the rotation or fit into the lineup, as opposed to hoping they would be able to come in when that turn in the lineup was most effective.
And then they have a bunch of relievers that had options that they could just kind of shuttle back and forth to Durham and AAA. Which seemed like it would be, at least for 2 or 3 of the Astros relievers in a situation where you've got some guys at U of H that are close by where you can do the same thing, right?
Right. Well, and during the season, they're going to move it to Corpus Christi, the taxi squad, but still 3 hours away.
Right.
Yeah, but you just put them on a sprinter and bring them up.
Well played.
Yeah, y'all needed to get
I don't even know what that means, but I'm drinking anyway.
You don't even have a water, Julia.
I know. I'm a mess this week. Week 10, falling apart.
Somebody needs baseball.
I do. We're so close. And I'd love to be a fly on the wall for some of these meetings, because Rich Strom's brains just there's like sparks going off as he's trying to get creative. And it has to be. Dusty Baker won't even name Justin Verlander as opening day starter yet, just because there's a lot going on. There's you can tell he's like, we don't even know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's, they're just trying to get through it day by day, which is what we're all kind of doing, guys. Hey, next week, let's talk about us a little bit and what it's going to be like to broadcast with no fans or not.
You don't want to talk about my sprint speed?
Just giving you a little teaser of what we can talk about next week as we get closer to getting back to work. Yay! In the meantime,
Miles Straw is leading off tomorrow against Lance.
Oh, man. It's good to have sprint speed at the top of the lineup.
No doubt. He realized what place he was in last year in that sprint speed leaderboard, so he decided he wasn't going to just jog out any fly balls anymore. He had to run every time just in case.
So he's looking to sprint down the line.
It's not a marathon.